welcome to week 4 of the class. So today what we're going to be talking over is different forms of reasoning, inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning. You're going to have a chance to get some practice here on using both styles of reasoning to come up with an argument. And just a sample argument, so this will help you in terms of trying to come up with your own argument based on your own topic. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have to deal with here and try to help you guys with your arguments. All right, so what is the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning? Okay, well, we talked briefly about it last week, but I want to go into it a little bit further this week. So, inductive reasoning is performed by crafting a conclusion based on the existing evidence. Rather than seeking out evidence which backs up a pre-existing conclusion you want to reach, instead you adjust your conclusion to match what actual facts exist. So this type of a reasoning format is going to be looking at the facts first, and then moving into the reasoning that you can come up with from those facts. Okay, it's very much fact-based. Now, the one thing is that this is less commonly used in most argument essays because your argument is usually set prior to performing your research because you're actually trying to fit your research into your argument to try to help prove it. You already have your reasoning, you already have what you're going to argue, now you just need to find the evidence that backs you up. Okay? In this case, though, this is actually something that's used more commonly in standard research papers, where you're doing the research first, and then once you know what information is out there, once you know what the facts are, then you're coming up with your conclusion. Now, it is more reliable this way, but it's also more difficult to argue. Okay? Now, whereas a deductive reasoning, you're working backward from the conclusion, looking for evidence which justifies that conclusion. The facts you are seeking are the ones which will prove your argument. Okay? This is what you typically see, and it's more commonly used in arguments. It's slightly easier to deal with, too, as having a conclusion to focus on helps to focus research tighter. Okay? So, if you have a certain goal for the research you want to do, it's going to ultimately help you in the long run to do that research because now you're looking specifically for the stuff that's going to help that argument. Let's take a look at inductive reasoning. Okay? The organization of an inductive reasoning essay is going to be following 4 guidelines primarily. Okay? First, you need to demonstrate the relevance of the topic. Okay? Based on what research you've done, based on how you are approaching the topic, you need to show that your argument is going to be relevant for it. And the reasoning that you're going to be using is relevant in dealing with that topic. You need to state the main argument and your claims very clearly so that there's no doubt in your reader's mind where you stand on the topic and what your take on the topic is. Okay? So make sure that you are stating your main argument very clearly. Arrange the evidence so that it best supports the main conclusion. Okay? Bring out the stuff that you've found in your research. Place it into position in your argument so that it supports your reasoning. Okay? Also, at this point, you also want to make sure that your research is going to match with the argument you're trying to make. Okay? And it's also going to match with the topic that you are trying to bring forth. Okay? Then fourth, interpret and analyze the evidence for the audience. Okay? This is part of where we get into our reasoning aspect of inductive reasoning. You're actually trying to convince the audience that you have the correct interpretation of the facts. Okay? So this is going to be where your main argument comes in on inductive reasoning. My facts are these. My interpretation of it is the one that you should derive from this research. Okay? That's what you're going to be arguing. Now, let's take a look at important points and how to handle each one in context. Okay? So, here we go. Real quick here, we have a first exercise. Okay? Talk about relevance to the topic. You have to show how your argument, on a smaller scale, a piece of evidence you're presenting, is relevant to the overall topic of the argument. An irrelevant point is only going to act as signal noise. Okay, so make sure you have your research focused and you are working with stuff that's going to help you. It's going to focus your subject matter. It's going to make things a little bit easier to deal with. It's going to make things clearer in terms of the topic and the subject matter. Not anything that's just going to confuse things by bringing in excess noise. Okay? So as an example, take a look at this brief exercise I have here. So here's the hypothetical situation. You're writing an inductive reasoned argument about election procedures and want to use the 2020 Iowa caucuses as part of your evidence. So I've got 4 links here to 4 articles. I want you to determine which one of these is least likely to match up with a thesis statement about the importance of having a backup plan for election security. Okay? So I would strongly recommend that at this point you should have these slides downloaded because these are links within the slideshow. Okay? But we have 4 articles. Okay? I'm just going to give you the headlines of them and give you a brief look at how long they are. All 4 of them are pretty short. Okay? So we have an article from the Des Moines Register, an article from NPR, an article from the New York Times, an article from Politico. Okay? So let's take a look at the 4 articles, starting with Des Moines Register. Okay, this is the Des Moines Register article. Iowa Caucuses 2020 delayed results. App glitches mar the caucus process. Full length of it here. If we go down. Here's the end of it. Okay, it's about half of this website is the article itself. Okay? All right, so next we'll go to the article from NPR. All right, headline, Lessons Learned from the Iowa Caucuses and Danger Signs Ahead. Okay, so here's the article. Going down. All right. About 2/3 of this page is the article itself. Okay. Next one, New York Times. New York Times article, How the Iowa Caucuses Became an Epic Fiasco for Democrats. Okay. I'm going to scroll down. Alright, well, I was going to show you the link to this one, but apparently I've used up all my free articles and I'm too cheap to pay for a subscription to the New York Times. But basically, it's a fairly long article. Okay, it's the longest one of these 4. Runs pretty much the entire length of that page. Okay? Alright, so let's go to the 4th one, which is Politico. Trump revels in Iowa caucus mess and takes a shot at Buttigieg. Okay? So we're going to scroll down. This is, again, about 2/3 of this page, and it's a short article. Okay? Alright. So, here is your task. I want you to take 10 minutes, follow these links, read over and discuss the articles, look for relevance, okay? If you need help from your teams, talk it over with your teams. But I want you to take a little bit of time and consider which one of these articles is going to be least relevant to the subject of election procedures. Okay? So take 10 minutes. We'll come back. All right, now we're back. All right, so next thing we need to look at is arranging evidence and interpreting facts. Okay, that's the next part of inductive reasoning. When you have the evidence to prove your point, it comes time to arrange it so that it is in the best, most logical order to support your main argument and your conclusion. Okay, there also needs to be an explanation to the significance of every piece of evidence you present. So you must show why the facts point to your conclusion being the correct one. All right. So first off, put the evidence in a logical order so that it helps to support your argument. Make sure that you have fact A, fact B, fact C, fact D. Okay. Make sure they're all corresponding to your reasoning. Okay. These are basically the evidence that points to the reasons why you support your argument. Okay. So you need to arrange the evidence in a manner that's going to make sense to the reader. You also need to interpret the facts for the reader. Explain why that evidence backs up your reasons. Why that evidence backs up your thesis statement. Okay? Why that evidence backs your argument, basically. Okay? Why do your facts point to the conclusion being the correct one? All right? So let's take a look at some more practice here. Okay? Now, this is, again, with those news articles. Okay? We're going to eliminate whichever one you decided was least relevant. Okay? We're just going to work with the other three. Okay? Out of the three articles you felt were most applicable to the election security topic, choose facts from the articles that back up a thesis statement that goes like this. Okay? Here's the thesis statement you're working with. Competent election security is vital to preserving an individual citizen's right to vote and have their voice heard in their government. Okay? So, pick out some facts from those articles to back up that thesis statement. Okay? How would you interpret those facts that you found in the articles to create a reason why that statement is correct? Okay? Decide how you would arrange the facts you have pulled from the articles to support the thesis statement in a logical fashion. The usual method is to place the most compelling piece of evidence first, then in descending order in terms of strength. So whichever piece of evidence you found that you feel is the strongest logically, put that first. Then in descending order based on relevance and based on strength of the evidence to support your argument. Okay? Also want you to discuss briefly how you justify including each fact you present. So, what's the overall meaning of that piece of evidence in context with the thesis? And what point does it make to prove the thesis correct? Again, this is a reminder. The thesis is up here. Competent election security is vital. Let me get that mouse there. Competent election security is vital to preserving an individual citizen's right to vote and have their voice heard in their government. Okay? This is probably going to take a little longer than just reading over those articles and determining which one was least relevant. So this one I'm actually going to give you 20 minutes to do. All right. Go ahead, pause me, and then we will come back to this. All right, and we are back. Now, so we've gone over now how to handle an inductive reasoning argument, okay? How you're going through the facts and deriving your conclusion from those facts, okay? Now, the next thing I want to do is talk about deductive reasoning, okay? Now remember, we talked about this, is that this works backwards, okay? So instead of starting with the research and going to your conclusion, now you start off with the conclusion, and you're going to find do the research to find the facts to match that conclusion. Okay? The construction of a deductive reasoning argument typically works backward. And the general process it goes through involves identifying a conclusion, examine the reasons for that conclusion, and then formulate the premise on which you're going to base that conclusion. Okay? So, first off, what are you going to argue? What is your main point that you are going to make in that essay? What is your primary argument? Then you need to look at the reasons that you have for that argument and make sure that they match up logically with both the topic and the conclusion that you're trying to make. Okay? Don't use any reasoning that comes completely out of left field. Okay? So don't want to have anything such as anything that constitutes a logical fallacy. Is basically what it comes down to. Okay? So examine your reasons for why you feel the way you do. And formulate your premise. Okay? Come up with the way that you're going to lead into your conclusion being correct. Okay? What are the conditions that are going to lead to that conclusion being correct? So once again, we're going to go through these steps and get a handle on them. Okay? We're still going to be working with the same topic, the election security topic, and the 3 articles that you felt were most relevant. Okay? Let's take a look here. So first, we're going to identify a conclusion and examine your reasons. Okay? Basically, this is your argument. You're going to want to make this the central point of your essay as you continue to debate the opposition throughout it. Okay? Keep in mind, when you are arguing, you need to center on your main conclusion, the argument that you're trying to make. Okay? Everything needs to be centered around that. You can't have too many digressions, because then your reader's going to lose sight of whatever argument you're trying to make. Okay? So identify your conclusion and then keep focused on that. Once you've identified your main conclusion, then you're going to need to look at why you've reached that conclusion. What are your reasons for it? This includes the reasons for the argument and how you justify thinking that way. Okay? What makes you believe those reasons? What makes those reasons correct in your mind? Okay? Why do you believe so strongly that this conclusion is the right one? Okay? Now, here's what I want you to do. Okay? Use the notes from the inductive reasoning exercises about election security and the Iowa caucuses. Okay? Take a look through those notes. Okay? Based on those alone, construct a conclusion you want to make. Okay? So hopefully you've had the opportunity to read through those articles. Maybe you've taken some notes on them. Maybe you can use your responses to the exercises for inductive reasoning as part of this. Construct your reasons, or construct your conclusion, just based on those, without looking at the articles. Based on those alone, construct your conclusion. From that conclusion, then I want you to construct the reasons for its support. Okay? I want you to think critically about all the possible reasons there could be for coming to that conclusion based on whatever evidence you have before you. Okay? Now, at this point, you can also search for more evidence on the topic if you wish. That's completely optional for you. Okay? You don't have to do it. Maybe it would help, maybe it wouldn't. Okay? It's going to be up to your own needs whether you're going to do that or not. Okay? So, take another 20 minutes on this part of the exercise. Okay? Use the notes, construct a conclusion, then construct your reasons for its support. Okay? I'll give you 20 minutes to do this, and then we'll be back. All right, and we're back. All right, so hopefully you've had a chance to take a look through your notes, look through your research, and construct your conclusion and come up with some reasons why that conclusion's right. Okay? The next thing we're going to be doing is formulating the premise. Okay? This is the basic principle on which you will base your argument. If you do this right, this is where you'll find common ground between yourself and your audience. Okay? Your premise is basically going to be our starting point. What is it that we're looking for? Okay? What kind of joint goal can we share with our audience to make it clear that we are on your side? Okay? So whatever basic principle you have is your way to reach out to your audience and find the places where you guys meet. Okay? And from this premise is where you're going to branch off into your conclusion. Okay? This is where the concept of syllogism is useful. Structure of syllogism is perfect for composing major and minor premises for the purposes of proving an argument. So if you're able to construct a syllogism for your main problem and conclusion, then it's going to be easier to construct the full argument because the structure is going to be similar. Okay? So you can use the syllogism as a framework. Use it as an aid to help you write a bigger argument. Okay? So, just to help you with the syllogism aspect, I have actually found some more resources on helping you understand how syllogism works and what the process is. I have a short clip I want to show you guys, which will talk about how syllogism should work, okay, and what syllogism is and what syllogism isn't. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so here is the video, just real short. You can see here it's about a little under 4 minutes. Let's take a look.
Before we move on to the invalid forms, here's one more valid conditional form that you should know. It's sometimes called hypothetical syllogism or hypothetical argument, or more informally, it's sometimes called reasoning in a chain. It's obvious why it's called this when you see the argument form in action. This is hypothetical syllogism, or reasoning in a chain. It's what you get when you chain a series of conditionals together where the consequent of one becomes the antecedent of another. You can chain as many of these together as you like. Note that both the premises and the conclusion are conditionals. In this argument form, we're never actually asserting that A or B or C is true. All we're asserting is a set of hypothetical relationships. If A was true, then B would follow. And if B was true, then C would follow. And from this we can assert that if A was true, then C would follow. In logic and mathematics, this kind of relationship is called a transitive relationship. Some relationships are transitive and some aren't. Tallness, for example, is transitive. If Andrew is taller than Brian and Brian is taller than Chris, then Andrew must be taller than Chris. On the other hand, being, say, an object of admiration is not transitive. If Andrew admires Brian and Brian admires Chris, there's no guarantee that Andrew will admire Chris. At any rate, what this argument form shows is that the relation of logical implication is transitive. If A logically implies B and B logically implies C, then A logically implies C. This argument form is often used to represent chains of cause and effect, like in this example. If we assume that hitting the cue ball will cause the red ball to hit the blue ball in a certain way, and if the red ball hitting the blue ball in this way causes the blue ball to go into the pocket, then we can say that if we hit the cue ball in this certain way, the blue ball will go into the pocket. This is precisely the kind of reasoning that a pool player is doing when they're setting up a combination shot like this. They have to reason through a chain of conditionals to figure out how to best strike the cue ball. It should be obvious, but in case it's not, you can also use this form to generate a modus ponens argument. In this example, we can see that the argument is valid, but we're actually using hypothetical syllogism in our head to derive a necessary premise. From premises 1 and 2, we get the assumed premise, if A then C. Then from this new premise, plus the affirmation of A, we can derive C using modus ponens. Now, the order of the terms is important. The argument form above, for example, is not valid. This is arguing backwards with conditionals. The direction of logical dependency doesn't work this way. We'll talk about this more in the next tutorial, The key point is that with conditionals, the only valid inference is from antecedent to consequent. You can't go the other way. So just to summarize, this is a no-no. Here's an example. Let's assume the following conditionals are true. If John studies hard, then he'll pass the test. If he passes the test, then he'll pass the class. Now assume that John does indeed pass the class. Does it follow with deductive certainty that John studied hard for that test? No, it doesn't. Maybe the teacher gave him a very easy test that day that John could pass without studying hard. Maybe he bribed the teacher to pass him. There are lots of possible ways that these premises could be true and the conclusion still false. On the other hand, if we knew that he studied hard for the test, we could validly infer that he passed the class. That would be the valid form of reasoning in a chain.
All right, so hopefully that gives you a better idea of how logically a syllogism works. This is actually going to lead into your deductive reasoning, okay? Because you have your premise, okay? You have premise and then condition. Then if this condition is true, then this condition is true. Therefore, this premise exists. Therefore, this condition is true. Okay? That's kind of what you're getting at when you're coming up with a deductive reasoning argument. Okay? So, here's the last bit of exercise I want you to do for this week. I want you to take 10 minutes, and I want you to construct a working syllogism for your take on election security. Okay? Whatever conclusion you came up with on the previous slide and the reasons that you're using for it, come up with a syllogism that will get us from a premise to that conclusion. Okay? Don't worry about your evidence when you're doing this. Okay? This is, as the video said, this is strictly hypothetical. Okay? Focus solely on what premise you think it would be easiest to prove and find a logical means to prove it. Okay? So, we're going to take 10 minutes to allow you to construct your syllogisms, okay? And when we come back, we'll talk over the workshop procedures because this is the first workshop week. So we'll be back. All right, and we're back. All right, so before we get into workshopping on these classical arguments, I wanted to just briefly go back over argument structure, how you should be writing these, what kind of layouts and what kind of organization you should have for these. Okay, so initially, introduction, state the problem. Okay, what is your topic? Use whatever hook you need to gain the audience's attention. Okay? From there, you go on to the main premise. Okay? Present and explain the main premise you're using as the basis for your argument. Okay? At this point, you should also present the conclusion you intend to reach. Okay? This is your primary argument. This is your first chance to state it. Okay? So, tell us what the premise is that you're working from, the main assumption you're making, and then the conclusion that you're drawing from that premise. Okay? Next, we go to the reasoning. Why you support the proposition. Okay? What are the reasons that you have for supporting that particular conclusion that lead logically from your initial premise? Okay? At this point, you also want to address counter arguments. What are the counter arguments that you can find about this subject that may not necessarily align with what you have to say about it? Okay? And then finally, the conclusion. Restate your main conclusion with a summary of the evidence presented which proves it. Okay? And remind readers of the main impression, of the main premise, and most importantly, leave a lasting impression. Okay? This is your parting shot. This is what you want to do to make sure that you have full absorption of your argument from your audience so that they remember it and hopefully take it to heart and hopefully, just maybe, take your side in it. Okay? So this is primary argument structure I want you guys to work with. Alright, so let's talk about workshopping. Okay, so this week we are doing workshopping on the classical argument essays. Okay, you guys are going to want to do this. Primarily, you want to do it on the eCampus discussion board. Okay, it's going to be a lot easier for everybody that way. Okay, here's the procedure I want you guys to do for this. Okay, if you were in my 1301 last semester, you're probably already familiar with this. So, on the discussion board, I want you to upload a rough draft, okay, to your team's thread, okay? Where I want you to post it as an upload reply to the team thread, okay? Because you'll be sharing it with your team and getting feedback from your teammates, okay? Here's where it gets really tricky, and where some of the groups last semester started breaking down. Every member of the team must post revision feedback on every essay. Okay? You need to be giving everybody feedback. Your teammates are depending on you. Okay? And you were depending on them to give you feedback. So, just as a pro tip here, post your feedback as a direct reply to your teammate's essay. Upload the essay as a reply to the thread, then reply to the upload to give feedback. Okay? You may have noticed already that the discussion board uses nested replies. Okay? So if you reply directly to the upload as opposed to replying to just the general thread, then your teammate's it's gonna be easier for your teammate to see what feedback applies to which draft. Okay? Now, the requirements here, you must post a draft to your team's discussion board on eCampus. Okay? And you must check that discussion board to find their draft, find drafts and offer feedback. Okay? There's no options about this. You have to do this. Okay? Now, just one other thing here. This is a revision workshop. So your feedback should be focusing on the content of the essay, not on the proofreading or grammar elements. That comes next week. Okay? This week, what you want to focus on is organization. Okay? How well do they have it organized? Are they using the framework that I've given you guys? Okay? Is it easy for you to follow? At least the second one, readability. How easy is it for you to read? Are they using any weird terminology, language, structures phrases, anything that is confusing or uncomfortable. This is also where we get into things such as paragraph breaks. Are there enough paragraph breaks that it makes logical sense, or are we looking at pages long paragraphs? Okay, that's what we don't want. Look at the focus. How well are they staying on topic? Are they remaining focused on their argument? Does everything circle around that argument, or are they going off into tangents from time to time? Also, check with make sure the subject is well analyzed. Okay, that the claims are supported sufficiently and appropriately. Okay, yeah, there is enough evidence to support the reasonings. Okay, there's enough reasons to support their primary argument. And also make sure that that argument is clear and understandable, that it has a clear thesis statement which gives you that argument. Okay? All this stuff is going to come together to make a successful argument. All right? So this is what I want you guys to focus on this week for the workshop. All right? That being said, this workshop is going to be running for the entire week. Normally, we'd only have it in one day if we were doing face-to-face. However, because of the online nature of this, we have a little bit of flexibility on this. However, just keep in mind, everybody has to post. Okay? Everybody has to post a essay. Everybody has to post feedback. Okay? As far as anything else going on, we also still have the discussion board topics. Continue working through those. Continue working through MindTap. Okay, and we'll do the workshopping, and we'll talk some more about argument next week. Okay, but I want you guys to make sure that you are workshopping this, and you are well on your way. Okay. We'll have another Collaborate session coming up this week. And with that being said, I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.